Hi, welcome back to the Count to 10 podcast. My name is Simon Sanborn, and I'm honored to have these two individuals with me today. We're all teachers, and I thought what a great opportunity as I kind of shift the podcast to some different things that don't just focus just on behaviors, but more about communication and relationships with people. I thought what better to have these two wonderful people that I have watched teach and do an incredible job with their students. Talk about some of the things that we struggle with day in and day out as teachers, and some of the awesome things that we get to experience as teachers as well. So thank you so much for being here. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Do you want to go first?
You can
Go ahead.
first.
Oh, okay. I am Susan Mitzel. I teach literacy and social studies here at the school. Do I name the
Perfect.
school?
I don't think it matters either
Okay.
way.
All right, okay.
Yeah, you're good.
My name is Danielle Kolick. I also teach literacy and social studies, but for 5th grade.
Awesome. I got my secondary degree in social studies.
Mine too.
Just never went
Yes,
there.
that's what my main degree is in, social studies.
Well, my principal called me and said, "Hey, you graduated, right?" "Yep, I did. I got a job for you." And I didn't even get a chance to go anywhere else because I have a special
wow.
education behavior focus.
Okay.
So
They
Nice.
snatched you up right away.
They
Yeah,
snatched me
that's a
up
good one.
right away. So we've been talking a lot. I mean, I know the three of us outside of this podcast have talked about social emotional learning and things like that. What do you feel like when it comes to all the pieces that are involved in, like we were saying before,
Maslow.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Do you feel like, make that correlation again for me that you're talking about that as well as when you had a conversation today?
Yeah, so I was talking with another coworker, and we were talking about how we've been seeing so many different behaviors and everything, and they said that they've been feeling burned out since the end of January. And I said, you know, it always makes me think back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If they're not fed, if they're not getting rest, if they're not feeling that their needs, like their core needs are being met, then nothing else can happen. And I feel like social emotional skills are right in there too. Like if Maslow could go back and add to that, definitely social emotional skills would be a part of it, because you know, if you can't even converse with a classmate or an adult, or you don't know what you're feeling and you don't know what the name of it is, or how to even get past some of the things that are going on in a little body.
Right.
You know, there's no way that you can focus on multiplication, division, you know, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Like all of that stuff it kind of hinges on having those core needs met.
Absolutely, because their minds are so focused on when are they going to get their next meal, or when are they going to be able to sleep tonight, or you know, the friendships that are breaking up, or you know, there's so many other things that are going on in their minds. And
do you feel like there's a social economical aspect to that? Do you feel like you have students who are more socially economically challenged and that you see more of those things, or do you feel like it crosses all barriers?
I think it crosses all barriers. I mean, there definitely is children who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They have a lot more needs as far as, you know, again, like we've mentioned, like the food and the stability. We see a lot of that too, but I've noticed it in the most recent years, especially, that it's just like kind of universal with kids.
Okay.
I mean, I have students who come from the higher socioeconomic backgrounds, but they suffer a lot from anxiety, and they suffer, you know, that there's a lot, there's just a lot.
So it may not
on.
be named all the same things, but they're all pieces of kind of the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, and people, I feel like kids who maybe had the support at home have access to more, right? They have access to therapy appointments.
Yes.
They have access to medications that parents
Yes.
provide. And then those kids who maybe don't have the support also don't have the access.
Absolutely.
So it's definitely like kind of a gatekeeping thing, you know, not by design.
Yeah.
But that's just the way the health system is.
And I definitely kind of try to find ways to sit back and be mindful about parents. I think sometimes I can get pretty frustrated thinking about parents not doing what they should be doing, quote unquote, and stopping, and because I forget that they are also in a very similar position. It's not like they don't want to feed their kids. It's not like they don't want to give their kids their meds or get them good sleep. Life just definitely gets in the way sometimes. And my associates are so good with that understanding. You know, they don't see a behavior from a kid and then be like, oh God, what did this person do?
Mm-hmm.
It's not about that. Nor is that going to solve any problems, right?
Right.
It's just going to
Yeah.
make you more
Right.
frustrated.
Yeah.
And it's probably not true.
Mhm.
Right.
So that's the hard part.
Exactly.
But that socioeconomical piece to me is a really big one. It kind of goes along with some of the stuff that's happening in our legislature about private schools and funding and things like that. I guess it's a common subject nowadays, but it's really hitting home here for us because we've had huge budget cuts. And we have a pretty good surplus in our, not that I think we should be spending our entire surplus, but could we be using it in areas, especially like public education, where it can have an impact? I was telling Danielle earlier, I went to Lynn Marr's choir concert last night, and not just the kids were awesome, but these teachers, these choir teachers, like they are, I forget, I think her name is Susan Anderson. I think
Sarah
she's,
Anderson.
yeah, Susan Anderson. And watching her, I watched her for a while, and the way she was like her movements were like empowering. Like she had a smile on her face. She was like bring it with the fist. Like she had all these things that were just engaging and pulling all that out of them.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
this is public education.
Absolutely.
This is the beauty of it. This is a perfect thing to kind of label that. But then I was like, well, that's easy, quote, kind of easy in the sense of like it's visual, it's auditory. But then people don't see the magic that happens in day-to-day classrooms.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because my husband was at that same concert, and we had a divide and conquer last night because we had two different things going on.
Yep.
And so I wasn't able to be there for it, but he showed me all the videos, and my daughter loves Mrs. Anderson. She has her for her choir, as she's her choir director, and she tells me all the time about the wonderful things that she does. So she has these high expectations, but she really sees the best in every single one of her students, and she really brings that out too. Like my daughter, for example, is very quiet and so very much an introvert, has a beautiful voice, but and is kind of nervous to share it. But Mrs. Anderson will point her out and go, I love your voice. You have, and she just is constantly like lifting her up.
Empowering
and
her,
it's empowering,
man.
absolutely. And she just said, Mom, it makes me feel so good, and it gives me this confidence to stand up there and sing. And so when I was listening to her, and my husband even noticed it on stage, you could pick her voice out because she was singing with her heart.
Oh,
And it was so
awesome.
cool. And
Amazing.
that's where that social emotional component is coming in, because that's happening in the classroom. We're seeing it as parents on stage, but we don't really know what's happening in the classroom.
Right.
And you get to hear it from the other kids too.
And
so.
the fact that she knew that that's what your daughter needed to hear.
Absolutely.
Like that she felt it, but also she was able to say that to her and
Yes.
have her see that she notices.
Exactly, exactly.
Because there's a lot of kids in choir.
Mhm,
And
a
to
lot.
kind
Yes,
of
there
single
are.
one out,
Yes.
but like, if she's doing it for your daughter, she's doing it for every single other
Absolutely,
kid.
Right.
absolutely, yes, yes.
Yep, and you
Yeah,
can see it
so
by the way she
cool.
was performing. It wasn't just, she wasn't picking
Oh, and
favorites
that
or
big
anything, right?
smile, and the way the kids hugged her at the end, the seniors hugged her.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it was so cute. Yeah.
Yes, and you got Bugowitz up there.
Oh,
who
he's
just
fun.
got
Wow.
a
The
na- a
kids love
nation-
him.
Oh, I know. It's hilarious.
Yeah, we just won. They won an award. What was it?
Yeah.
Show choir.
Show choir,
Yeah.
like national
National
title.
10th
title.
Street, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pretty phenomenal.
It was
and then I watched it and I was like, holy cow.
You forget they're high
Mind-blowing.
school kids.
Oh my God.
Absolutely, just
There's
like
no way.
yeah, just
Yeah.
like the Les Mis performance. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I heard that one. I didn't
It
get a
was
chance to see it. I heard it was
either.
incredible.
So many times. It's one of our favorite musicals, and so of course you go and you're thinking you're like, ooh, I'm hooty-tooty. I know all about this. And
I'm going to watch this with
I'm
a
gonna,
discerning
I'm
eye.
so judging. And I, of course, I'm like, ask my daughter, because she was in it, and I said, so what's the policy, the sing-along policy? She says, no, you can't do it. So shut me down. And
Only at home.
I know, my husband's like, what about dancing? And she's like, no. And so we're watching this, and my husband and I are looking at each other, it was incredible. You forgot you were watching high school performers. I mean, it was just incredible. It was
I have friends who I'm in
great.
school with who said we heard about it, so we made sure we saw it, and we've never seen anything like it.
yes.
And
absolutely.
I remember my wife and I went and saw the orchestra go perform at the Paramount, like a date night. We're like, oh, we'll just go and see it. And I was like, what is going on around here? Like
Yeah.
these incredibly talented kids.
Oh yeah.
And again, I don't know why it keeps sticking with me that that's a public education thing. That you can't obviously get the kind of amazing things happen in other schools, but people really put down a lot of teaching and a lot of why are we doing this and why are we doing that and what really are you doing?
Exactly.
And it's like, well, your kid gets out of 3rd grade and they're ready for 4th grade.
Exactly.
Because somebody was performing some magic and doing a great job of doing that for them.
Yep.
You know, so it's like, and I told my dad, I said, wait till you hear this orchestra, you won't believe it. He's like, well, it's a high school orchestra. I'm like, I'm telling you, it's gonna blow your socks off. And he could not. Same thing. Like, I thought they were all adults. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And they're so honored. You know, the teachers are so honored. Like they're just like, these people know what they're doing. We respect them. The kids think that. It comes across as the kids respect their teachers tremendously.
Absolutely.
And those teachers love them back, and they. I mean, I always gave Bugwitz a hard time saying he was a little cocky sometimes, and he always thought that was funny. But I was like, but you kind of, if you have a role like that, you should have a little bit of like, yes, I got this. You know, I know what I'm doing.
Well, and as teachers, we are in a sense performers, really, because we get up in front of the classroom, and I tell my husband, I am on all the time. From the moment I walk in that door, I am on. And even, I mean, we're human. We have our good days, we have our bad days.
Absolutely.
But I mean, we are, you know, we have to make that content engaging. We have to get those kids, you know, really interested in what they're learning. Because if you're going to sit there and drone on and it's going to be, I'm just going to talk to you and talk at you, they're not going to connect. They're not going to make those meaningful connections. And I just think that's, you know, and I've often asked my students, are you not entertained? You know, because you're just like, come on, guys, wake up. But people don't realize that. It's so easy. You know, we talk about the legislations, and we see, you know, all these policymakers. They don't see the man behind the curtain. They don't see what happens in our classrooms. They just see I feel like they see what they want to see. And so it's really hard as educators is that you know, you're giving your all, you're giving your heart, and you are, you know, you genuinely love and care for these children and for their, you know, for everything that they do and everything that they're going to become, that you genuinely care for them. And people, I don't know if people see that, and sometimes it feels like you're not seeing
They see it as a job. It's just another job.
Right.
But I would never poo-poo anybody else's job.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I'm like, okay, I would assume that you have that job, you're good at it. You know?
Well, and just like you have people that are poor at their jobs, there are teachers that maybe aren't the best, or you know, don't have ascribed to the same philosophy that we do. And I feel like some people take and imply in everybody view of when they see those teachers. Oh, well, that teacher, you know, they represent everybody. You know, it's kind of like when, I don't know if you heard Meghan Trainor's most recent podcast. She was talking with some influencer, and on her podcast she said F teachers. And as a teacher, I watched that and went, wait a second, wait, what? Because she again assigned it to all teachers. And then of course she was able to come back and issue an apology, but after you had recorded it, edited it, kept it in the podcast, it's kind of hard to judge that you're really sincere in your apology, you know.
Exactly.
And so I think about the kids that every single day I'm, you know, asking, you know, do you need a snack? You look kind of like you're, you know, kind of struggling a bit, or I noticed you fell asleep. Why don't you just take a few more minutes and lay your head down? You know, it's that kind of stuff, that human element of teaching that I think gets lost in the legislation. They don't see us as human. They don't see us as putting our heart and soul. They don't see me standing up and reading about 1933 Mississippi with my southern accent to keep these kids engaged, right?
Exactly.
Like that is one of my favorite things to do. And again, and the kids will come back to, oh, I remember when you read that book?
Yes.
I do remember that. And you know, they won't remember what you taught them. They'll just remember how you made them feel.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know? Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and I was thinking, becoming a marriage and family therapist, they talk about, right now we're kind of learning the science of the therapy, and then the art of the therapy is who we are in that space. That's easily equatable in this situation. We have the information. New teachers have all the stuff, but they haven't been in there yet to get what's their art going to look like? What's the magic that's going to happen? You know, do you let your personality come out? You know, been a difficult one for me as a behavior teacher, just because being my authentic self would probably allow for more reactionary behavior in the sense of being angry or sad and those kind of things. So I do feel like I'm kind of guarded because I
Yeah.
can't just be
Yeah.
myself. Now, and I try my best to find those moments where being empathetic or being understanding and those kind of things, but I do find myself not being as free as I wish I could be.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
that would be kind of I think that's what I'm looking forward
That
to.
would be difficult, yeah, I think, 'cause
To not be yourself.
yeah, I think that would be really hard. So, I mean, I'm sorry.
Feel sorry for me? Thanks.
No,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. No,
You're okay.
I don't mean it like that. I'm trying to process that and think about that and just think, oh, that would be really hard.
To kind of be
That would
on
really-
it. Yeah,
yeah,
kind of
to-
like you're on the edge.
On edge,
On
yeah,
the edge, on
yeah.
guard, kind of. Yeah.
I mean, because we've had days where in the classroom
Mhm.
where we're just like that, and it, and you feel icky,
You
know,
do.
because you're
You
just
do.
like, this is not who I am.
Yeah.
But and those are the hard days. Those
Mm-hmm.
are the difficult days. So I couldn't imagine experiencing that every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's an everyday thing. I think it might just be a personality trait,
Okay.
good, bad, or otherwise. But it's something I'm trying to be more aware of because I'm
Yeah.
not. That's one thing I am struggling with is can I be a good therapist if I am guarded and I can't. So I have to find a way to get past that and move past it. So, and I'm also learning that it's there for a reason. It's
Yeah.
there to take care of me
Yeah.
for something, and
Yeah.
now it's a hinderment, but it's still there, and I
Yeah,
need to
absolutely.
recognize it. So.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like you get caught up too much in the politics stuff? Does that bother you more, or do you feel like you are so focused on school that that's really kind of like a non-issue for you?
I feel protected in our district just with as big as it is. I feel like people in smaller schools are suffering.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
your smaller districts where you don't kind of have this cushion around you of the community. I mean, I feel like the majority of our parents and our stakeholders are like top notch. Our
Yeah.
board is great.
Yeah.
Like I just feel very protected. And even if legislation comes down the pike, I know that again, my principal is going to support me. I think that's the biggest thing that I see is like if your admin supports you and you feel like you have a good kind of a community in place. I mean, you can make even those bad days not so bad.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree. Our admin has been incredibly supportive and just always there to listen to us and really support us. And I think that really helps kind of keeping all that other stuff at bay. That way we can focus on our jobs, and that's been.
Yeah, I have not worked in other school districts, but I've worked with or for every single principal in this district, except for Westfield. She's new
Wow.
and I haven't been there yet.
Okay.
In some capacity worked with them, and they are all just phenomenal. I mean, just really phenomenal.
You can tell that their focus is on the kids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like no question.
Yep.
They all have their different personality traits and their ways of running things, but you can tell that's their focus is the
Exactly.
kids and the
Exactly.
teachers
Yep.
Yeah.
too.
Well, they know that's one and the same.
Yeah,
They're taking care of the
exactly.
kids, they're taking care of us as well.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And to me, that's one of the bigger deals, is knowing you have backup. I've had friends who were teachers who had bad administrators, and they were done within a year because it's just, if you don't have somebody backing you up and feeling like looking out for you, even if it's just like almost like it sounds like a parental kind of figure of like
Right.
making sure you're good.
It's true.
But my principal all the time has said to me like, hey, just so you know, this happened, but I took care of it, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yes,
I was like,
absolutely.
oh, fantastic, thank
or
you.
yeah, or like you'll get an email from a parent and you're just like, those goes, and I'll ask him, hey, I need your help, I need your support, and he's like, I got you. And that's where it feels good because
Yeah.
it's like, okay, because I mean, it's just nice to have that.
Yes.
It has your back. They have
Yes,
your back.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. How do you think teachers impact society? It's a really big question.
Oh.
But how do you think, obviously it's through children in the neighborhoods and things like that, but how do you feel, do you feel like that's something that could be impacted down the road? I mean, if we start balancing these schools out where public schools really are for the only people that can't really afford a private school, if it goes that kind of level, it's going to be tougher and tougher, And so I'm wondering how that's going to impact people, and impact society in a whole of when we have this. I do feel can be some changes in public education.
Oh,
I
yeah.
do feel that there could be changes in
Yeah.
unions when it comes to teachers who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. That drives me crazy too.
Yeah.
But there has to be some kind of balance in there and some kind of compromise. So I'm just like, I wonder, like, when you think about public education, it's how I grew up. Did either of you go to a private school?
Nope.
No.
Okay. I've had friends that went to private schools and they didn't feel like it was that big of a difference.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But I wonder how that would affect a society where you have some kids in public school and some kids aren't. And I'm not going to assume that the public schools would be terrible.
Yeah.
But if the
Yeah.
funding's not there, there's lots of school districts in the nation that are pretty underfunded and have a terrible time with things.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what those impacts on society are going to be.
Yeah. I don't think we'll see it very much in the Midwest,
Yeah.
but in bigger cities, I can see it being a problem. I can see it definitely being haves and have-nots, because my biggest issue with charter schools and private schools is they don't have to take kids with disabilities.
Yep.
They are not required.
Yeah.
And
You're right.
I feel like that at its core is a fundamental problem, because they can say, nope, we don't want that kid because we can't accommodate XYZ. And it makes me so frustrated, because in society, you have people who are handicapped. You have people who are mentally, physically disabled. You have to accommodate them because based on everything in our society. Why would schools not be held to the same standard?
Yes.
Exactly.
So, and I
Exactly.
feel like if you're getting public funding, you should provide it to everyone. You should
Absolutely.
provide, enrollment to everyone. And I can see the difference with maybe a private school that's attached to, I mean, obviously not accepting kids with disabilities, but private schools that are attached to a religion.
Okay.
Right? That's a
Yeah.
bit of a different situation. But if you are just, starting your school, your charter school, to just get the creme de la creme of the students in your area, you're missing out. And you're missing out on so many opportunities that kids who have mental and physical disabilities can provide to
Right.
your students.
Absolutely.
I can't tell
Yeah.
you how many times my kids have gone and asked to interact with, our level 2, level 3 students who want to go and hold, the little boy's hand who's blind. They want to go and give the other boy, high five. Like, I'm not saying names here because I don't know
Yeah.
what I can
Nope,
say.
you're
But,
good.
Yeah.
they want to engage in them, and they want to make them feel like they are their classmates, because they are.
They are.
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
our
Yes.
society is made up of those people.
It
Yeah,
is. And if we don't
absolutely.
teach empathy at this young age, and all of a sudden they're getting out of a private school or a charter school and they've never seen anyone who has a mental disability, how are they going to act?
Exactly.
Right.
And yeah. And there's
Sorry,
that-
I'm on my
no.
soapbox about this.
No,
No,
this
that's
is
okay.
good.
That's
That's
exactly
good.
it.
I'm passionate about
But
it.
you're
Yeah.
right. That's not reality.
Right.
And that little bubble that they're creating is not how the world works.
Right.
And they are doing more of a disservice to those students and even those teachers. Because really, would you want to be in a classroom where you don't have,
Oh.
when you have just like all the same ability? Like you just don't. I don't know.
Because it's not an accurate representation of society.
Exactly. And you really hit the nail on the head when you were talking about the empathy and the inclusiveness. Is that the kids learn that by being around
Yep.
every single all these different students in their classroom. And if they don't have that exposure or that experience, it's going to be hard for them.
Yeah, and do you want to have a class society that's like that, where you have these people who are up at the top, who are kind of homogenized, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like there's no flavor. Like, you know what I
Right,
mean? And
right.
I'm not saying those people would be without personalities or anything, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's not how our society is kind of supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's a really good point.
Exactly.
Right.
And historically speaking, we've been there. It's like that's been done. And we are supposed to progress and move
Right.
forward and
Right.
and
Feels like
learn.
we're going backwards.
And it feels like we are. It feels like we are taking a million giant steps backward to, because I mean, that's, again, we learned from that. We grew. And why are we going back to that? Why do you think that's okay? Because, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm kind of a guy that just thinks it's all money. That's just my
Oh,
idea.
absolutely.
And I
Always,
actually don't
absolutely.
understand the other side of the argument, and I haven't looked into it, so I'm not talking with any kind of background knowledge. But it makes me feel like that's kind of the push, is because somebody wants to own a business to make some money.
oh, absolutely.
And I kind of feel like that's what college is for, and that's what private schools are for. I just don't think public money should be going to that,
I agree.
I agree 100%.
because most people that can afford that can do it anyways.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, went to high school in Virginia, and I had some friends in my neighborhood that were private school kids. Yep, but their parents were really, really wealthy, so they were able to do do that stuff.
That's usually what it was when we were growing up. It was kids who were in private school were the
Right.
ones that had lots of money.
Right. Or
Yeah.
their parents really wanted a religious education for them.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you feel? I mean, you had a meme for your on TikTok for how teachers are stressed out. Do you feel like that's like isn't
Check it out, it went viral.
I'm kind of famous now.
That's so funny. The stress is so real.
So real. So real. It
And
is,
I've always
yeah.
said this, and I've said this on my podcast before. There is the stress of doing a job. I get that part.
Yes.
I think there's definitely a stress of managing so many little people, or individuals that work with you. But I feel like there's this inherent weighted. Excuse me, I have my sinuses are really sick.
Allergy season.
It's allergy season.
So terrible. Yeah.
So I feel really nasally. There's like this underlying pressure of who you're taking care of. It's not like you're just going in to do a job.
Right.
Teachers go in because they're like, I have all these people that I'm taking care of. Loving them, caring about them, making sure their needs are met, and then you're educating them on top of that. Don't you feel like that's just a constant pressure that's always there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And we have so many different needs in our classroom, physically, emotionally, mentally. We have so many different needs that are just that we are constantly trying to meet. A student, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And you're like, yes, let's go ahead and go out and visit for a second. And oh, hey, we're being pulled in 15 different directions on top of.
Right.
Having
And
to
you're supposed to be
teach.
developing a relationship with each
Exactly.
individual kid to make that bond
yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, when does that happen?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, because you have all these other things that we have a lot of testings that we have to do, and a lot of monitoring and interventions, and there's just, which is great, but we have so much. Like I always told our principal, like, here's my plate and here's everything that's on it. And that's a teacher's plate, right? A teacher's plate is like this, and so what am I going to do with that?
Yeah, and somehow nothing falls off the plate though.
Exactly.
It never
You're right.
does.
It never does.
It never falls off the plate.
Never does.
That's awesome. But think about that though. That's a great
true.
analogy.
I never thought about
it's a
the
big full
falling
plate,
off,
but
yeah.
somehow you manage to pull it off. But maybe it's that same thing. Maybe the idea that what is required of you is such a big deal that makes you that focused, and so things don't fall off the plate. A kid doesn't get lost,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
right? You're not going to allow that to happen.
That's true.
And if it happens one day, I make sure it doesn't happen the next.
Exactly.
If I think, oh man, I didn't connect with that kid today, I will make it a priority to do it the next
Absolutely,
day.
yeah.
Even if it's just, hey, I remembered that you had a baseball game over the weekend. How did that go? Just those
Yes.
little things. And I really try to do that in the beginning of the year, right? And just building those relationships. We don't start with content right away. And if
No.
we do, it's very surface. But I'm trying to connect with them. I'm trying to play games with them and just get to know them, so that when if I'm teaching a lesson and all of a sudden, one of them starts to act like a ding dong, I can just be like, up.
Exactly.
And then they're
they
like,
know.
oh, and they know. They know that I'm talking to them, and they know what that means, and you know what I mean, because we've already built that rapport. I don't have to
Absolutely.
necessarily call them out,
Yeah.
Or even just like going over and tapping them on the shoulder.
Exactly. Yep.
I think it's a big burden, but it's also a big blessing, because I just went to my first graduation party for one of my former students, like my very first one, because I'm the oldest first-year teacher in the world. But it was a former fifth grader, and it was a student that he was very quiet, but like I went to his graduation party, he gave me a hug, and it was so nice. Like, I don't know,
really
it
sweet.
meant a lot.
Yeah.
It meant a lot that I was
Absolutely.
even invited. Like I got an invitation in the mail, and that was super cool. So
That's
I don't know, it
Made
just
an
meant a lot,
impact.
and and it was. I could go, oh yeah, I can name 3 things about you
Yes.
as a fifth grader.
Oh, that's
And that
cool.
sticks. That stays with
It
you.
does.
That
Interesting.
stays
It
with
really
you. Yeah.
does.
Yeah. I always think, like, when I became a teacher, of course I didn't have kids, and then like your mind definitely shifts. I mean, you're always there for the students, and you're always there to take care of them and be. But like when you have children, something clicks. And when I go into my room, I always think, what kind of teacher do I want my children to have? What kind of experience do I want my kids to have in their classroom? And if I'm like yelling at my students all the time, and I'm on them all the time, and I'm constantly grumpy, is that something I want for my own kids? No. So these parents are trusting us with their most prized and most
Yeah.
precious treasures. And that is like, we need to really keep that in mind and whenever we're interacting with them and getting to know them, because really they look up to us. They want us to know about them. They want us to know about their baseball game or share their stories, and
Yeah.
it's really important to them. And
Wow, that's really neat. I never thought of it that way. That's a really good way to walk into your classroom.
I mean, every day, it's not,
No, it's not.
there's day.
no.
We're human.
You are a person, yeah.
Well, and I feel like if you restrict, like, because I always tell the kids, I don't yell. I'm not a yeller. I mean, I'll get excited and I'll raise my voice like that, but I'm not a yeller, unless it's something serious.
Absolutely.
And then they know. Like today, I was trying to talk to a teacher. The kids were being noisy. I was like, everybody sit down, and like instantly they dropped.
Yep. Yeah.
Because I use it very sparingly. Because again, it's like, okay, this is a situation where you just need to sit and be quiet, and I need to talk to a teacher and whatever. So it's just, you have to, but you know that about your kids then,
Right.
true,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And I don't
Well,
know.
you've developed it, you've worked on it, you know
Yes,
that, so it just happens
absolutely.
overnight.
Consistent. Yep.
Yep.
I'm going to a graduation this year for one of my former students from elementary school, and I had my first one last year.
So
He was my
cool.
very
That's
first
so
student
cool.
in kindergarten.
That's awesome.
And
That
I
is
was
so
lucky enough to
cool.
move through buildings, and so I saw him at all kinds of different levels and kind of stayed connected with him.
That's
And he was
really
in my
cool.
son's graduating class, and so I got to see him walk and everything.
That's
It was
really
so
cool.
cool.
That's
And
Get
you
emotional
know
about
what?
this. That's
I
kinda
know,
cool.
that's
Well,
so cool.
because I mean, you hear about behavior-focused kids being all the trouble, and they can definitely be trouble.
Yeah.
But there's a soul somewhere
Oh
in
my
there. You know what I
gosh.
mean?
They're still
we
kids.
talk, yeah, they're still
Absolutely.
kids, and we've talked
Yes.
about some students that we share where you're just like, oh my gosh, this kid's personality is so funny, so wonderful.
Yes.
Yep.
You know, I hope things get figured out so we can kind of see this kid blossom.
Yeah.
And this is one of those kids where he was a pretty tough kid, but towards the end of elementary school, you start seeing the more of the social, emotional needs. First, it was structure, consistency, a lot of TLC, and then you can see other things. Oh, these are the other things we can really start working on. And he was one of those kids that by the end of 5th grade, he was like, hey, Mr. Stammer, can I teach your social skills class? I was like, sure. So he would walk through all the coping skills.
Oh, that's
He'd walk
really
through
cool.
how the
That's so
program works and
cool.
who do you go to if you need help. He's just, he's a great kid.
Well,
That's
and,
really
and
neat.
you understand that when they're teaching it, they're actually learning it even more.
Right.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And
Exactly.
that's so huge, letting kids teach something that they're knowledgeable about, but then they get even more knowledgeable.
And there's that empowering feeling.
Oh
you
my
know, like
goodness.
they're,
Yes.
they're leaders and they get to
And
like,
how
you know,
often
just-
has this kid been a leader in his life?
Exactly. How
Oh,
many
no.
opportunities has he been given? Yeah, you're
if
right.
anything,
yeah.
he's been yanked around all over the
Yeah,
place.
exactly,
Right?
yeah.
So it's the
He
absolute
gets to be the authority
opposite.
figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's fun.
it was pretty cool. But it's interesting to kind of see how they mature and they grow. You know, and some do definitely go down some bad paths once in a while, but then you see others that are just like figuring things out and
Yeah.
have all the supports in school, because I mean, it's not just Boulder Peak, but all of us
Oh,
moving
absolutely.
forward, there's tons of supports. Do you have anything like in particular you would say to I'm sorry, terrible segue. A new teacher, like a new teacher, a new teacher coming in, like what would you say to a new teacher who's like, here's a lot of talk, and then
Yeah.
sees how busy it is and what's
Yeah.
really involved in being a teacher,
Yeah.
you know?
It was funny because like where I had a practicum student, you had a student teacher, and I had a practicum student who I get her again next year as a student teacher. I'm so excited. She's phenomenal, just a natural born teacher. And we made her a little book of advice from the kids. The kids all wrote down a little piece of advice for a new teacher. What would you ask a new teacher?
Cool.
Or what kind of advice would you give a new teacher? And so many of them were, have patience, and then mine was love big and have fun.
Oh,
Love
That's
it.
a
Love
big
it.
one, because I mean,
yeah.
you can teach until the cows come home, right? But to love
Yeah.
those kids and to have fun and just make that experience
That's awesome.
a good one for them.
Oh, that'd be
so.
great.
Love
Yeah.
big and have fun. I love
Love
that.
big and have fun.
This one's kind of more personal for me because my oldest is actually training to become a teacher. So in 2 short years,
Oh.
she'll have her own
Mine's
classroom.
going
Wow.
into elementary.
It's it's the biggest compliment I think
Right?
to teaching is to and to have your own kid go in, and even though she sees all this stuff. And I think with her, I just keep telling her it's all worth it. It's all worth it. And I'll send her funny things that happen to me and not so funny things that happen to me, and I just kind of always with that underlying note of, this is all worth it. This is why I do it.
Absolutely.
I do
Yeah.
it because I get, I was downstairs today taking pictures of all the sticky notes of the notes that kids put up for teacher appreciation.
Oh.
I'm like, oh, there's one for, like, finding those, and just those, they're like gems to me. Like, that's the most precious thing to me, is when a kid writes you a note and tells you what a difference you made.
Oh my
like,
gosh, those love notes are the best
Yes.
things ever.
They are. Like,
really
that's
are.
what makes me,
Yes.
like, if I am having a bad day, I will literally go through my
Yep.
pictures and go, oh, there's that note that student
Yes.
wrote to me, and that was a really tough student, or a
Yep.
really tough day, or whatever.
And the biggest ones are the ones that you're not you never expect it to come from. I received one from a student from last year, and I never wouldn't in a million years would have expected that, and that I made an impact on that student, and they were so just, oh my gosh, it was so awesome. And I go, thank you for holding me accountable and putting and setting high expectations, and for always believing in me. And and it was kind of one of those things where you're always pumping them up, and they're just like, yeah, whatever. The whole time, like, okay, whatever.
You never know if you're getting through.
Exactly, you don't know, and then that happens, and you're like, oh my gosh. And then of course I'm reading it in the break room, and I'm just sobbing because it is. But it is worth it. It is, even the hard days.
Yep, even the hard days, it's all worth it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that is a perfect time to close it up. That's great. It's all worth it.
It's all worth it.
really
Right?
is,
Every bit of the
exactly.
pressure, every bit of the stress, whatever's happening outside of this building, it's all worth it in the end.
Worth it, yes.
Absolutely. That's why we do what we do.
That's
Exactly.
right. Danielle and Susan, thank you so much for being
Yeah,
on this.
thank
It was
you for
fun.
having
Thank
us.
you.
This
Yeah,
was
this was
fun.
cool.
If you guys have any questions, you have anything you want to add to the conversation, you can email me at Simon, SYMON, Sanborn, SANBORN, @gmail.com. If you have questions for them, I'll ask them, and then I'll get back to you and I'll talk about it on another podcast. If you have comments, any of those things, please make them constructive. If it's something that's going to be not worth reading, I won't read it. So make sure it's a constructive criticism if you do have some, because we're always open to better ideas, different perspectives. It's about the only way we're all going to make it through this crazy life. So thanks for your time. We appreciate you being here. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Adios.
Bye.